Tiana's dog lay dying on the clinic table. The boyfriend she loved had just abandoned her. Penniless, she made one desperate, final call. Home. Auntie, buddy, he ate something. They need money. On the other end of the line, the harsh aunt she had run from was silent. And then a cold final click. She had hung up. Stay with us to see what Amara did next and what became of Tiana. The air in the setting sun was always thick, heavier than the Philadelphia humidity outside. It was an oppressive mix of jerk spice, simmering goat curry, and the sharp metallic tension radiating from its owner, Amara. Amara stood over the industrial stove, a woman in her mid-50s whose posture was as rigid as her principles. Her hair was pulled back in a severe black wrap, and her face, though lined with the stress of a long life, showed no softness. Her eyes, dark and quick, missed nothing. She moved with a relentless, punishing rhythm. Chop, stir, plate. To Amara, the restaurant was not a place of joy. It was a fortress built against a world that had, long ago, proven itself treacherous. Her niece, Tiana, moved in the oppressive silence of the kitchen. At 19, Tiana should have been light, but Amara's control had pressed the youth from her shoulders. She was small but resilient, with watchful, intelligent eyes that held flickers of a dream Amara refused to see. Tiana wiped down a stainless steel counter, the sound of the wet cloth seeming too loud in the quiet kitchen. The only buffer in their small ecosystem was Leo. He was the prep cook, an older gentleman with a soft middle and a kind smile that seemed to apologize for existing. He caught Tiana's eye as he diced onions with practiced speed, offering a small, sad wink. Leo absorbed the tension, the peacemaker who never quite managed to make peace. Tiana, Amara's voice cut through the sizzle of the flat top. It was not a question, but a command. Table 4 is empty. Do not let them sit. Wipe it again. I just did, Auntie, Tiana whispered. Then wipe it better. Amara did not look up. To her, better was not an adjective. It was a state of survival. She had learned that lesson hard back when her first business partner, a man she called brother from her own village in Jamaica, had smiled, shaken her hand, and disappeared with every dollar she had saved since 1993. That betrayal had forged the Amara of today, a woman who believed trust was for fools, and that money, guarded by discipline, was the only wall high enough to keep the pain out. The conflict, however, now had a new shape. It was sleeping inconveniently by the back door, blocking the path to the storage room. A low whine broke the kitchen's rhythm. Amara's head snapped up, her gaze locked onto the source. He was a rescue mix, perhaps a year old, with the hopeful, mismatched ears of a dozen breeds and a coat the color of coffee and cream. Tiana had named him Buddy. Tiana had brought him home from a city shelter 2 weeks prior, a spontaneous act of defiance Amara had not seen coming. To Tiana, he was a secret hope. To Amara, he was an indulgence, a risk. This, Amara had said that first day, pointing at the dog, is a mouth that does not pay. Now Buddy whimpered again, restless. That thing is in the way, Amara snapped, gesturing with her spatula. He's not a thing, Auntie. He's just... Tiana started. He is a bill, Amara corrected. Move him. We are not running a kennel. Tiana untied her apron, her shoulders slumping. As she coaxed the large, gentle dog to his feet, Amara watched her. She saw not a girl and her pet. She saw weakness. She saw the same foolish, trusting heart that had almost destroyed her. And she vowed, as she turned back to the unforgiving heat of the stove, that she would never let that weakness take root in her house. Tiana lived in the slivers of time between Amara's demands. In those stolen moments, she did not rest. She drew. Her sketchbook, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in her small attic room, was her only true possession. It was filled with the faces of Philadelphia, the sharp angles of the city, and the soft, expressive eyes of Buddy. To Amara, these drawings were a dangerous waste. Once, years ago, Amara had found a charcoal sketch Tiana had left on her dresser. She had held it up, not with pride, but with suspicion. This, Amara had said, her voice flat. does not pay the light bill. She had not forbidden it, but her dismissiveness was a heavier burden than any rule. But someone else had seen them. Tiana's secret was not just the art, it was Kevin. She met him in the alley behind the setting sun, under the weak glow of a single security light. Kevin was a musician, a young man with a lanky frame, a gentle smile, and a worn acoustic guitar case that seemed a permanent part of him. He was everything Amara's world was not, soft, patient, and full of quiet dreams. While Amara saw Tiana's art as useless, Kevin saw it as essential. "You have talent, Tiana," he had whispered one evening, carefully turning the pages of her hidden sketchbook by the light of his phone. "You see the world. Not many people actually see." He was the first person who had ever looked at her work and not seen wasted time. He was the validator of her dream, and for that she felt a loyalty that was fast becoming stronger than her fear of Amara. Tonight, the kitchen was finally quiet. Leo had gone home, and Amara was in the office, the rhythmic click-clack of her adding machine punctuating the night. Tiana took her chance. She scraped the leftovers from the steam table, rice and peas, a few pieces of jerk chicken, into a takeaway container. It was food destined for the trash, but she knew it would be a meal for Kevin. She slipped out the back door, the humid air, a relief. Buddy, tied to his lead near the door, gave a soft whine, and Tiana paused to scratch his head. "It's okay, boy. I'll be right back." Kevin was waiting by the dumpsters, strumming a muted chord on his guitar. "Hey," he smiled, his face lighting up. "Hey," Tiana said, handing him the container. "It's not much, but—" "It's everything," he said, taking it gratefully. He set it aside and nodded toward her apron pocket, where the corner of a new sketch was visible. "Show me?" She was pulling it out when the back door flew open, its metal hinge protesting with a loud, grating squeak. Amara stood framed in the doorway, her face a mask of thunder. She saw the boy. She saw her food. She saw the sketch in Tiana's hand. "So," Amara's voice was dangerously low, "this is what you do. You steal my food to feed this freeloader." "Auntie, no, it was just scraps," Tiana stammered, stepping in front of Kevin. "He is an eater, not a worker." Amara advanced into the alley, her eyes fixed on Kevin. A boy with a toy guitar and no job, feeding on the work of others. "Ma'am, Kevin began, standing up, but Amara cut him off. "You," she spat, "will not leech off this family, and you," she turned to Tiana, her voice rising to a sharp crack, "are forbidden from seeing him. Do you hear me?" Tiana's eyes filled with tears of embarrassment and rage. "I bled for this restaurant," Amara shouted, her voice echoing in the narrow alley. "I did not bleed for you to throw it all away on some dreamer." She grabbed Tiana's arm, her grip like steel, and dragged her back toward the restaurant, leaving Kevin standing alone in the dark. The days following the alley confrontation were suffocating. The setting sun was no longer just tense, it was a tomb of unspoken rage. Tiana and Amara moved around each other, their silence a heavy, brittle thing. Tiana's resentment had hardened into a quiet resolve. She had one more secret. It was not a rebellion, not really. It was an application. Weeks ago, fueled by Kevin's encouragement, Tiana had secretly registered for a night course in fundamentals of design at the local community college. She had used the meager tips Amara allowed her to keep, seeing it as a small investment in a future her aunt refused to acknowledge. The mail, as always, was Amara's domain. She sorted it at the small office desk, separating bills from junk, her lips moving in a silent tally of the restaurant's finances. Tiana was wiping down the front counter when Amara walked out of the office, holding a single, crisp white envelope. It was from the Philadelphia Community College. Tiana's heart stopped. Amara's voice was dangerously calm. "You have been busy, I see." She did not open the envelope. She simply held it, weighing it. "Auntie, it's just one class. At night, I saved my own—" "You saved—" Amara's calm finally cracked. She ripped the envelope open, her fingers tearing through the college logo. She pulled out the paper inside, a letter of acceptance, and stapled to it the tuition invoice. The sight of the dollar amount was the trigger. Amara's face contorted. This was not about education. It was about betrayal. It was about money. This, Amara said, her voice shaking with the memory of her own past losses, is what you do with money? You throw it away on pictures? It's not throwing it away, Tiana cried, her own voice finally rising. It's for me. It's my one thing. Your one thing? My one thing is this restaurant. The one that feeds you, that clothes you? Amara held the paper up. You would rather throw money out the window than learn a business? You are a fool, Tiana, just like I was. With a sudden, violent motion, Amara ripped the acceptance letter in two. A sharp sound of tearing paper echoed in the empty restaurant. Tiana flinched as if she had been struck. Amara ripped it again and again, letting the small white pieces of Tiana's dream flutter onto the floor. That was the tearing point. Tiana looked at the shredded paper, then at her aunt's unyielding face, and something inside her went cold and still. She was done. You're right, Auntie, she whispered, her voice devoid of emotion. She untied the strings of her gray apron, the one she had worn every day for 2 years, and dropped it onto the floor, on top of the confetti of her future. Tiana! Amara's voice was a warning, but Tiana was already moving. She ran up the stairs to her attic room, grabbing her backpack and her sketchbook. She dialed Kevin's number, her hands shaking. Kevin, you have to come get me, right now, please. She ran back down, scooped up Buddy's leash from its hook by the door, and clipped it to his collar. The dog, sensing the urgent, terrible energy, whined and pressed against her legs. She burst out the back door just as a rattling sound announced the arrival of Kevin's old beat-up car in the alley. Amara was right behind her, her face a mask of fury. Tiana, you walk out that door, you do not come back. Tiana opened the back door of the car, coaxing a nervous Buddy inside. She didn't look back. She jumped into the passenger seat, slammed the door shut, and screamed, "Go!" The car's engine complained, then caught. They sped out of the alley, leaving Amara standing alone, watching the red taillights disappear into the Philadelphia night. The freedom Tiana had craved tasted like mildew and stale air. Kevin's place was not a home. It was a single, cramped room in a dilapidated building across the city, where the paint peeled in damp strips and a faint sour smell rose from the carpet. Their new home was also occupied by Mark, Kevin's roommate, and the drummer for his band. Mark was a man in his late 20s who lived in a permanent cocoon of noise. His attention always split between the glowing television screen of his video game and the large headphones clamped over his ears. He greeted Tiana's arrival with a vague grunt and did not move from the sofa. Buddy, the large rescue mix, was the most obvious problem. He paced the small room, his tail low, his claws making nervous clicking sounds on the dirty linoleum. Used to the alley and the relative space of the restaurant, he was now trapped in a box. He lay by the door, emitting a low, anxious whine, his eyes fixed on Tiana. The dream of artistic validation dissolved in less than 3 days. The money Tiana had grabbed in her escape, the money she had saved for her art class, was nearly gone. "We need food, Kevin," Tiana said, her voice small. "And dog food. Buddy's bag is almost empty." It's fine, Kevin murmured, strumming a gentle chord on his guitar. He sat on the edge of the unmade bed, lost in his own melody. "The market is just slow. I have a good feeling about my new track." Kevin played music, Mark played video games. Tiana, facing a reality that none of them seemed willing to acknowledge, went online and found a waitress job at a 24-hour diner. A week later, Tiana dragged herself up the stairs after a double shift, her feet aching and the smell of stale coffee clinging to her apron. The room was exactly as she had left it. Mark was yelling at his screen, and Kevin was sitting on the bed, writing in a notebook. "The landlord posted another notice," Tiana said, dropping her keys on the cluttered desk. "We're late." "He's always posting notices," Kevin said dismissively. "I used the last of my tips to buy a bag of dog food," Tiana said, her voice trembling with exhaustion and frustration. "Kevin, I can't be the only one. This job, it's not enough for all of us." "What?" Kevin finally looked up, offended. "I'm working on my music. This is my work." It's not work if it doesn't pay the rent, Tiana snapped. You have to do something. Get a real job, anything. A real job? Kevin stood up, his face hardening. You mean like at a convenience store? You want me to give up my dream? He looked at her, his expression full of betrayal. You, of all people, are saying that? You want me to abandon my art just because things are tight? You're starting to sound just like your aunt. Tiana stared at him, the blood draining from her face. He had taken her deepest wound, Amara's dismissal of her art, and twisted it, using it as a shield for his own irresponsibility. She realized, with a cold, sickening lurch, that Kevin was not her savior. He was just Amara's opposite, a person who would sacrifice everyone else's survival for the sake of his own dream. Tiana returned from her diner shift to a room that smelled of defeat and neglect. The argument with Kevin had settled over the small space like dust. Mark was out, and Kevin was pointedly strumming his guitar, ignoring her. In the corner, near the overflowing trash bin, lay the consequence of their carelessness. A bottle of harsh, industrial-strength cleaner, used by Mark to clean his drum hardware, had been left uncapped. It had tipped over, creating a small, acrid puddle on the floor. Buddy, who had been listless and pacing all day, was now huddled by the door. Quiet. Too quiet. Buddy, Tiana said, dropping her keys. Come on, boy. Time for... A low, wet sound stopped her. Buddy retched. A violent spasm shook his body as he threw up on the floor. Tiana recoiled, then her fear sharpened. It was not food. It was foam, tinged with a chemical blue. Oh no, she breathed, her eyes darting from the vomit to the open bottle of cleaner. No, no, Buddy. As she reached for him, his legs began to twitch. A terrible, high-pitched whine escaped his throat as his body went rigid. Kevin, Tiana screamed. Help me, he's shaking. Kevin finally looked up, his face pale. He saw the dog, the mess, the panic. He saw the reality of the situation. He ate the cleaner, Tiana was sobbing, trying to hold the convulsing dog. We have to take him to a vet, now. Kevin backed away, his eyes wide. He saw not a sick animal, but an expense he could not cover, a problem he could not solve. That's bad, Tiana. I'll go get help. I'll call someone. Hurry, she pleaded. Kevin nodded, but his eyes were already on the door. He grabbed his guitar case. He did not grab his wallet or his phone. He only grabbed his guitar. He backed out of the room, promising, I'll be right back. Tiana never looked up. But as the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall, followed by the distant rattle of his car engine, starting and then fading away, the silence he left behind was absolute. He was gone. She was alone. Scrambling, Tiana managed to wrap the shaking, whimpering dog in a blanket. She ran into the street, flagging down the first car she saw, a taxi, begging him to take her to the nearest 24-hour clinic. She burst into the bright, sterile waiting room of the veterinary hospital. A vet tech saw the state of the dog and rushed him to the back. Minutes later, a veterinarian appeared, her face grim. He's ingested a toxic corrosive. We're starting fluids and trying to counteract the poison, but he's in shock. He must stay for intensive treatment. Yes, okay, anything, Tiana whispered, her knuckles white. The vet nodded toward the reception desk. We need a deposit to begin the overnight treatment. It will be several $100s. Tiana's blood ran cold. She checked her pockets. She had $14. She stumbled back to the waiting room, her mind a blank wall of panic. She could not call Amara, not after this, not after proving her aunt right. Her hands shaking, she scrolled through her phone and found the one safe harbor she had left. She pressed the button for Leo. Back at the setting sun, Leo was wiping down the bar, listening to Amara count the register. His phone buzzed. Tiana? He answered, confused. The only reply was a strangled, desperate sob. Tiana, what's wrong? Amara's head snapped up from the cash drawer. Leo! Tiana choked out, the words torn from her. It's Buddy. He ate something. He's sick, Leo. They need money. Amara was across the room in 3 strides. She ripped the phone from Leo's hand. Tiana? The voice was cold, sharp. Tiana froze. Auntie, she whispered, they need money. He ate poison. I A long, heavy silence stretched over the line, filled only by Tiana's terrified breathing. Amara's face was unreadable, carved from stone. Then Amara ended the call. The click of the phone was quiet and final. Tiana stared at her dark phone screen, a new, colder despair washing over her. Amara handed the phone back to a stunned Leo. She turned, walked to the hook by the back door, and took her car keys. Tiana was huddled in a hard plastic chair, trying to disappear into herself, when the bell over the clinic's front door chimed softly. She looked up, expecting a stranger. It was Amara. Her aunt stood in the doorway, her purse held rigidly in her left hand, her car keys in her right. She looked small in the harsh fluorescent lighting, but her presence filled the room. Tiana flinched, bracing herself for the storm, for the shouts, the accusations, the inevitable, crushing, "I told you so." Amara's eyes swept the room, cataloging the sterile environment, the exhaustion on Tiana's face. She did not raise her voice. She did not speak. She simply walked past Tiana directly to the reception desk. "I am here for the dog," Amara said, her voice flat and formal. The receptionist, startled by her intensity, pointed to Tiana. "That is her," Amara said, cutting the woman off. "She is with me. What is the bill?" Tiana watched, frozen, as her aunt pulled out the restaurant's worn leather bank pouch. She listened to the quiet transaction, the polite, "Thank you, ma'am," from the staff. Amara paid the deposit without hesitation, signing the forms with a firm hand. The drive back to the setting sun was a vacuum. Tiana sat in the passenger seat. In the back, Buddy lay on an old blanket, sedated and breathing shallowly, his whimpers muffled by the medication. The silence in the car was heavier and more suffocating than any argument could have been. It was the sound of Tiana's brief, failed independence. It was the sound of her complete and total surrender. She had run away seeking freedom and had returned as a debt. Amara, for her part, simply drove. She stared straight ahead, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her face set in the same hard lines it wore when she was counting the register after a slow night. She had, once again, been forced to pay for someone else's mistake. When they pulled into the alley behind the restaurant, the familiar smell of spice and old grease was almost a comfort. Amara unlocked the back door. Tiana carried the sleepy, heavy dog inside, placing him on a bed of old towels in the warm corner by the stove. She stood there, not knowing what to do, what to say. Amara walked past her and went to the sink, washing her hands. Tiana watched her for a moment. Then, with quiet automatic movements, she went to the closet, took down her apron, and tied it around her waist. She walked to the sink, picked up a steel wool pad, and began scrubbing the industrial pots left over from dinner. She was apologizing in the only language Amara understood, work. A few days passed. Buddy was weak but recovering. Tiana worked, slept, and cared for the dog. Not a word was spoken about Kevin, the apartment, or the money. On the fourth morning, Tiana was at a small table, polishing silverware before the lunch rush. Amara came out of the office, holding not the day's receipts, but a slim booklet. She placed it on the table in front of Tiana with a quiet thud. It was a course catalog for the community college. Tiana stared at it. She opened it, her fingers trembling. Amara had marked 2 pages. One was for a class called Introduction to Small Business Management. The other was Fundamentals of Design. Tiana looked up, her throat tight, her eyes filling with questions. Amara did not meet her gaze. She pointed toward the corner where Buddy was sleeping. "He is shedding," Amara said, her voice rough. "Clean it up." Healing, as we saw with Amara and Tiana, often begins not with loud apologies, but with a quiet, difficult choice to simply show up. It is the unconditional love, the kind Buddy offered, that so often lights the way, forcing us to find the best parts of ourselves in the silence. These are the bonds that truly matter. If their complicated journey touched your heart, we would be so moved to hear your own story of a Buddy in your life, down in the comments. We read every one. By subscribing and sharing, you help our community tell more stories of these quiet, powerful connections. We hope you will continue the journey with our next narrative, which is waiting for you now on the screen.